ICQ Podcast episode 259, RF Safety. Hello fellow amateur ham radio enthusiasts and welcome to this our 259th episode of the ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, supported by our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M0NJX is joined by Leslie Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo, Matthew Mike 0 November Juliet X-Ray and Bill November 3 Juliet India X-Ray to discuss the latest amateur ham radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature on RF safety by Bill Barnes November 3 Juliet India X-Ray. Well, as always, we'd like to thank our donors to help keep the show advert-free. In this episode, it's the monthly and annual subscription donors that get a big shout-out for keeping us advert-free. As always, we'd like you to consider us by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you can send away is always greatly appreciated. Well, now we join Martin, Leslie, Matthew and Bill to discuss the latest amateur ham radio news, including slow scan TV on a Baofeng and signals from a dead NASA satellite. Hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 259 of the ICQ News Roundtable. Tonight I have Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB back from a long layoff, haven't you, Leslie?
Yes, I've been down with the flu and all sorts of things, but now I'm back in the land of the living now, and it's all sorted out. So we're here, which is great, and I've been playing radio and all sorts of bits and pieces. So yeah, it's good to be back.
That's good. That's good. And Bill's got something to pick on now, so that's...
oh, dear.
He'll be happy. Won't you, Bill? Mr. Bill Barnes N3JIX.
Good evening, everybody. And yes, welcome back, Leslie. I missed you, and we will definitely give you some more jabs as we go on here. But I'm glad you're over the illness, because that's nothing to mess with this year.
Yeah. And third person on the panel tonight is Mr. Nassau M0NJX. Hi, Matt.
Hey, hi, everybody.
Yeah, good to have you on.
Thank you.
You've been busy, Bunny. I saw you Monday night at the club. That's 2 Monday nights in a row. That's pretty good.
Oh, I know. Doing things was like 8 days of radio. It's been fantastic.
Yeah. I expect you'll be globetrotting soon, though, won't you?
Maybe, yes.
Yeah. And unfortunately, right at the last moment, Mr. Edmund Spicer had a family issue. He had to go and help one of the members of the family, so he's not with us tonight. But I'm sure he'll be back for the next episode we record with him. So, as I say, hope it all goes well for you tonight, Edmund. Looking at our news stories this week, starting off with a young gentleman, Andy M6XFC, has been doing slow scan TV with a Baofeng. Now, before you all jump and put the crosses up and, do exorcisms on him, Andy's a foundation license holder, the equivalent of a technician in the US. And I think it's great he's thinking out of the box, quite honestly. Who wants to go first? Leslie, do you?
Well, I'd read him about this, and he's used a £2 speaker mic from Baofeng, and used the audio connection of a computer smartphone connection, and it all worked fine. Now, he's got an article on Essex Ham, been on their forums and recently, and they're very, very good, lots of activity. But this guy's really, really good, and he ought to be congratulated. The only thing is that now he's caught the bug, it's not curable. So that's the only thing. But good luck to him. He's, well done, mate.
Yeah, I think so. Bill, what do you think on this one?
You will never hear me discouraging anyone from having some fun and playing around and learning something new. This is really neat, and I'm glad he's sharing it with everyone as well, with his articles.
Yeah, well, let's just say thinking out of the box. Matt, you're a builder experimenter. Would you have thought of doing SSTV with a Baofeng?
No, I wouldn't. And, it's great to see someone who's just in the hobby, M6, license, who's got that entry point radio, the Baofeng that we love to hate, or the hate to love, or I don't know, whatever.
I love them. I think they're great.
You like it? You say that. There are people out there. I remember we did an article. I'm going off topic here. We did a news article sometime last year about a U.S. repeater keeper who was going to ban anyone who tried to access his repeater.
Yes.
Remember that guy?
Yeah.
He had an issue with Baofengs. They were not real radios. They're $20, 20-pound items, but they work on. They're dirty. I know. They did the spectral analysis. I remember in QST magazine again last year, I think it was at Dayton, or maybe it was before they moved. They brought a spectrum analyzer. You could bring your handheld in and have it swept, and had a look at the spectral purity. And these Chinese imports were consistently failing in that UHF VHF space. But having said that, filtering could be better. Fair enough, but it gets people on the air. I mean, we were talking again in previous podcasts where they're so cheap. You could actually imagine a club giving away these radios with every successful, new novice license candidate. I think we talked about that, internally in our club as well for a little while. There's nothing wrong with it, right? And here's a guy who's got a hook. He went to see a local club who did a demonstration of SSTV, and that turned him on for some reason. That was his button, and they pushed it. And so he went and had a go. It's all about experimentation. And he did it with literally 2 resistors and a bit of wire and a bit of networking. He asked some Elmers. He asked some people on the internet chat rooms and what have you about how to do this. What can I do? And he experimented. That's such a great piece of our hobby. Something that I like, as you say, making bits and pieces, making circuits and what have you. And learning about electronics, and if that's what feeds his interest, and as Leslie says, it's going to go far. It's going to build and build and build. Once you get that bug, you can't stop.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Well, I took my Baofeng to Cyprus with me last year and used it. I keep one in the door pocket of my car. It's the go-to. It just lives there. The Baofengs actually have one advantage over a number of radios, is that the on-off switch is a true on-off switch. So when it's switched off, it doesn't drain the battery down, whereas a lot of radios, the on-off switch is just a processor reset. So I think he's done really well. And Andy, M6XFC, Andy, carry on doing what you're doing. Enjoy the hobby.
Nice one, Andy.
Yeah, and carry on. Well, I wish this next news story was as nice a news story.
I'm just turning into Frankenstein on this one and biting my table here. Carry on, Martin.
Yeah. Well, the new BT broadband service, BT being what used to be British Telecom, to transmit across the VHF band. Frightening.
No.
Go on, Leslie.
No.
Yeah, they're going to do it. They're going to do it, Leslie. I don't know what the outcome's going to be. The new BT OpenReach VDSL2 eventually could affect the spectrum right up to 106 megs. Not only does that going to affect us amateurs, it's going to affect the listening people on the VHF FM radios that everybody's bought for years, thinking that they're not going to have interference. So you've gone very quiet, Leslie.
Yeah, I'm trying to be polite and not say anything, and I'm gashing at the table at the same time, as you can probably gather. I just think it's appalling. I mean, if you think many years ago, if somebody operated a transmitter, let's say on AM medium wave, they would have the equivalent of Ofcom, it was the post office then, I believe, come down on like a ton of bricks. And now it's all commercial. That's similar sort of behaviour, but on a much larger scale seems to be acceptable. Or have I got it wrong?
I don't think so. Bill, I can't think it'll be long before, if this takes off in the UK, you will have it in your side of the pond if you don't already.
I surely hope not. The one thing I can tell you is it's my opinion that VDSL works well. It's not one of the technologies that people threw out there that the customers never liked because it didn't work right. But man, oh man, what a huge swath of spectrum to be leaking across the copper cables. Not around exactly where I'm at because I'm out in the backwoods, quote unquote, but in the more urban areas, I know they have jumped to the fiber to the home instead of copper lines, DSL. Not only does it avoid the whole RF pollution, RF interference, keeping up all the, hundreds of miles of old copper lines, it just makes it just plain easier to deal with. So I'm kind of surprised, but at the same time, I'm not surprised because who wants to forklift out, 100,000 miles of copper wire and to put fiber optic cable in, even though that fiber optic cable will give them as much bandwidth to do whatever they want to sell at some point. But yep. And as I said in the chat, oh no, here we go again. Another RF polluting thing just showing up.
Yeah, there is a good video of this on one of the RSGB forums. I believe it's on the EMC committee, and there's a guy that's done a study on his like local difficulty, and he shows a noise level at what the noise level actually is, and you can actually the problem with all these EMC problems is you can't see them, and it's only when you get the equipment to say that's a noise level. You've got to get above that noise level before you can communicate. Not only you can communicate, but all the other devices that rely on the spectrum as well suddenly become useless. That's a problem. You can't see it, but it does affect equipment.
Yeah, there's something in the back of my brain says that for AM you've got to be twice the noise level to be able to be heard properly, and for FM it's 4 times the noise floor. So maybe I'm wrong on that, but it's something from years ago. If I am, well, I may be rumour-mongering, but I still think that is the case. Matthew, what's your thoughts?
Well, it sucks, right? That's the first reaction. It sucks. Excuse my French. I also think probably Whisper and JT65 and all those kind of newfangled low, signal in the noise floor kind of modes have a long and prosperous future in amateur radio, because I think we're only going to see more and more and more pollution. Look, I'm reading this article, and BT's OpenReach, the ISP provider or the hardware provider for this new technology, GFast or G.Fast, is offering, actually is guaranteeing to its subscribers, you will get refunds if it falls below this guarantee. I think up to 4 times in a year, but it's guaranteeing rates of 152 megabits or 314 megabits per second, when the standard UK is about 40 megabits per second. Astronomical change. And, the commercial demand for that kind of capacity is going to overwhelm I think it's 80,000 amateur licenses in the UK, as an example, right? We're just going to get dwarfed. It literally is the crying demand for this kind of internet access and media streaming is we're going to fall into the noise floor. No one's going to hear our cries. It's an analogy.
The golden rule is the man with the gold makes the rules.
Yeah. Before we did the recording, we were talking about look, we're amateurs, but in the UK we don't pay a license fee. I don't know, Bill, do you guys pay a fee annually in the States?
No, not anymore.
Not anymore.
If you had a Vandy call, you did.
But it was a fairly nominal amount, right? Like $20 or something, or whatever.
I think it was 14. It's been a long time.
Right. And so on the basis that we don't pay anything, we should not expect anything. And I challenge that. I don't think that's reasonably the case. That here's a fairly clear-cut example. If there's a technology that is going to, or is demonstrably able to, interfere with a part of the radio spectrum that's not theirs, they have no right to it, it's allocated by international treaty for other users, primary users like amateurs, then there should be some reproach from us to say, put a filter, a notch filter on that box, or adopt some other methodology or whatever. And I think we all probably expect that even if we do have a legal case, it'll be buried under years of appeals and be the last thing the local council or Ofcom or whatever the enforcement process might be would take action upon. So the other thing, maybe it's a silver lining. Maybe having this stuff dumped onto our HF bands and VHF and everything else will propagate and promote more invention in different modes, which can deliver the same kind of SSB or CW, not just quiet below, the whisper modes, but real voice modes to combat it. Who knows? So maybe it's a good thing that we have this problem because we'll innovate. But that will come out of amateur radio.
But also, there's a couple of things that I spotted here. 106 megs is top of the VHF FM band for commercial radio, where we broadcast radio. In the UK, they're trying to get us to go to digital audio broadcast, DAB. So, which is up, I think, at about 174 to about 220 megs. So, kind of, that might be one of the reasons they're not bothering to do anything about if the local VHF broadcast band gets interference. They'll just say, I'll go to DAB. But once again, that's naughty. And the other thing also is 106 megs. So we're going up to 106 megs. That's great. So in 3 or 4 years' time, they're going to want to go even faster because everybody wants it to be even faster. So you go up in frequency a bit more, 118 megs, and you're starting to hit the aircraft band. And that's, all right, a lot of 118. Yeah, a lot of 118 is, ground service, but it wouldn't take much. It starts at 118 and you start interfering with planes. So kind of, I don't know what they're going to do.
But your analogy there, if we do run into the problems on, say, the FM broadcast band, 108 megs or whatever FM, they have they pay a commercial license. That's a commercial enterprise. They pay a lot of money. They broadcast. They can expect that the spectrum of their listeners, those FM radios that everybody has, should be able to hear them, right? And if they don't, then there's got to be some recourse from the FM stations to say that, the medium that we are using, that we have paying for, and they pay a lot for a license, I'm sure, is unusable or has degraded in some way, right? Yeah. So I think it's new technology. It's one company launching something in the UK. Maybe it's a small local story, but there's a lot of people who they're going to step on if this really takes hold and develops, as you say, with more users. I mean, I think they're only rolling this out to like 250,000 homes, which sounds a lot, but there's millions and millions in the UK that need that would still demand this kind of service. So it would only grow in the future.
Yeah, everybody will want it, and everybody will want more. It's a fact of life. Well, it worries me. Let's see that. Let's hope that people come to their senses. And if you're going to run high-speed internet, let's hope they put in fibre optics so they don't pollute the airwaves by using long lengths of copper as aerials, quite honestly. Oh. Right. On that depressing note, let's move on.
No, it's all right. I've just taken the tablet, so don't worry.
You're on the Mogadon now, so you'll be all right. You calm down. Yeah. Okay. Just moving on. Iceland have an update to their amateur radio regs, and interestingly enough, they've got the 15 watts on 60 meters, and a typo on 40 meters. Matthew, you go first on this one.
Well, I'd like the typo, please, if I have an option here. They're on 40 meters. Their license documentation admits they only have 100 watts on 7.1 to 7.2, and actual fact, it should read 1,000 watts. Oh dear, must be nice. But it's great. I guess another country's falling into line with Work 15 band on 60 meters, and it looks to be it's the confirmed spectral channels, I think, that other countries are using. great. I think it's a slow move towards standardization in that 60-meter band.
Yeah. Bill, you were saying earlier that being a QRP operator and a real QRP operator, because a lot of UK license holders think that 100 watts is considered as QRP in the States. You were saying you're running 8 watts. You could hear people. They couldn't hear you because they were running mega linears, weren't they?
Yeah, that was during the contest last weekend. So, yeah, contest weekends, all games are off. But I can tell you, as far as 60 meters, is we don't have the band, the WRC 15 band yet. But the spot frequencies we have, we're allowed to use up to 100 watts. And I'm really surprised and pleased at the range that you get out of 60 meters with, and nobody's using over 100 watts. So I think it's a good band and probably a good place to be. The only thing I feel bad for the Iceland guys is they lost their other allocation they had. They had 150 kilohertz wide allocation, which did let them use 100 watts, and it was available by special permit, but is not anymore. So that's kind of sad.
Yeah, but as we've said many times, the WRC 15 ruling on 60 meters in many ways is a good thing because it will harmonise the rest of the world. And when the UK flip over to it and the rest of the world flips over to it, at least we'll all be able to talk to each other all around the world. Leslie, any thoughts?
No, I used to use 5 megs many years ago, but that wasn't for amateur radio use. But I do know how useful it can be. I mean, we used it a lot on we'd call it here inter-G communication. Short range comms, NVIS, straight up, straight down, where you got like hilly terrains for stuff like that. That's what we used it for.
Yeah, sitting in your tank.
I was only in the tank once.
All right. Right. But military use, say 5 megs, there's a lot goes on down there, or used to. So I think it's good they're getting it. Moving on, and Bill's had a bit of a go at this one and almost been muscled out, I think. But AO92 now is commissioned and open for amateur use. So, Bill, you've not had a lot of luck at getting into this one yet, have you?
No. The good news is these birds are easy to use. They're easy to get into, relatively speaking. The bad news is they're easy to get into. So every pass, and I've only tried to get in the AO92 2 or 3 days when it wasn't, horribly cold outside. And all, 3 passes I tried to listen to was just pile up. And I'm just not the kind of guy that just calls into a QSO in progress and just hopes I can bust it. I kind of wait for that pause in between, but there's no pause. But it hears well. I mean, it's a good receiver from what I could tell, just like AO91, and it's a good transmitter. I can hear it very easily. I don't have to be as precise pointing the arrow antenna in the sky like I need to be with AO85. So I think we got another real winner up there.
Yeah.
And I believe there's another one coming up here shortly as well. They're going to launch another one here shortly.
Yeah. Well, it transmits on 435 and receives on 145 880.
Other way around. It transmits on 145 880.
Right.
We talk to it with 435 350.
All right. That's me reading the document wrong.
Yeah, you may have to do some Doppler correction. Go up 5, go down 5, depending on which way it's coming across the sky. I mean, there is a little bit of stuff you got to learn as you do these, but it's relatively simple to get into once it's not, colossally busy.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say, we'll put the frequencies in the show notes. Matthew, you fancy any of this?
I do. I never worked satellite, so I'm a newbie here, but I know, Martin, you've got a sort of an itch to have a go at this, right? I mean, I think in the club we've talked about activities where we can get people together, make antennas at home or what have you. And I think you did some preparation for this, right?
Yeah, I'm working on it at the moment. I know Chris has built an antenna. At some point in time, I'll either have my antenna built or I'll go out with Chris and we'll work a couple of satellites and say it'll be Chris, I, and whoever wants to come, I would suggest.
Great. Well, I'll be there. I'm done. I'll be if I'm in the country, of course.
Yeah. Leslie, have you ever done any satellite work?
No, none at all. I can't recall doing any at all. So this is all new and interesting stuff to me.
Yeah. Well, I suppose because it's FM, the FM's, and Bill will probably confirm this, but the FM satellites are supposedly a lot easier to work if you're starting out and learning how to do satellite stuff. So, as Bill says, if it's got a good receiver and it transmits well, this could be a good one.
Just a quick question: How do you find out the position? Do you use an app, or how's that actually done?
I actually have 3 different things I do. One is I just go to the AMSAT website, punch in my grid, and say, show me this, when AO92's next passes are. I use an app on the iPhone when I'm actually out in the field. Give me a second here while I stall. Okay, there we go. I use an app called HamSat by VosWorks. That's what I have on the phone. In fact, I have an AO85 pass coming soon. Too bad I left the stuff at home. Anyway.
Focus, Bill. Focus on the podcast.
Focus, yes.
Focus. Keep it focused.
Focus. And the other one is on the computer. I use a program called G-Predict. It's installed on my Linux box, and I just told it to go out and download the Keplerian elements from AMSAT, and it just gives me that nice little display. It just shows me the next few that are coming. So the nice thing about it is they're all settled into a pretty predictable orbit. So like right now, I know roughly when I'll be looking. Like the last week, it was around 10 a.m. local time. So they'll float a little earlier or a little later, depending which way it's going. And, you get into a pattern anyway.
Yeah. So these are all low Earth orbit objects, right? So they have like a pass, every 90 minutes or something like that?
It's like every 12 hours. There's like 2 passes for me, and then there's nothing for like 12 hours and 2 more passes. So they're...
but that's local to you. But I guess as an orbit, they are a short orbit device, or but they're I guess they sequence around the world, right?
Yes, they are low Earth orbit birds. And the part that just blows my mind is that it's a 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter cube, and I'm bouncing a radio signal off of it. That's wicked cool.
Yeah. Well, I can confirm the G-Predict works really, really well under Linux. There used to be a Windows version, and I must admit I went looking for it the other week and couldn't find it. So I don't know if the new version of G-Predict is no longer produced for Windows, but you may find it on the internet. But it was certainly a very, very good satellite prediction program. And AMSAT would certainly be the place to look if you want to find out more about satellites. And we'll put the frequencies for this FoxSat program in our show notes. So it'll give you the transmit and receive frequencies. So hopefully that's of use. And I have got to get on and do my satellite contact. You're dead right, Bill. Moving on.
You only got like 5 months.
Yeah, but I only had like about 9 months, a few months back as well. So, I've got to get on and do it. And I've got to talk to do at the club as well, and a couple of other bits and pieces. So I'll tend to do it just in time. It will get done, but it'll probably be a bit rushed towards the end. Moving on. 5 megs, 60 metres in New Zealand.
Yes!
Yeah, go on, Leslie. You can go first on this one.
No, I just think it's a good story, Apart from the one a bit earlier on, this is a good story. They've got two channels in the 5 meg band, one on 5.354 and one on 5.3634. limited to 10 dBW, which I believe is 10 watts. And I believe that's for SSB. So that's a good news, and it's gradually, amateur radio amateurs are gradually getting onto that band and getting an allocation, and I've no doubt it will grow in years to come.
Yeah, I reckon it'll be good, and I would say the more people that get it, the better. I mean, they've got 2 spot frequencies. I'm hoping that they'll open up to the world. What do you think, Bill?
I'm really, really glad that New Zealand is also getting on 60 meters. That's really good news. They are power limited to 10 dBW, which is 10 watts if my math in my head is right. But hey, it's a start. You got to start somewhere. I think it's good. I think the band probably would be very useful down there. So I think they're going to have a lot of fun with that.
And we were talking earlier, you believe that 60 meters with MVOS would probably cover both islands.
That would be my guess, but they might need the power just to twidge a little higher, like maybe 50 to 100 watt range. But yes, I think that would cover both islands, at least daytime, maybe both day and night. So because I'm actually shocked over here in the States now. I've been paying attention to 60 meters a little more since I got an antenna up for it. It's very impressive band, very impressive range. It definitely fills in between 40 meters and 75 phone, which is really neat.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Can't say any more good about it.
Yeah, that's a good one. Matt, any thoughts on this one?
I got a question, and maybe it's for the audience now or our listening audience on the podcast, so they can write in and tell me. What is 60 meters, given the limitations on power and frequency alignment across countries and so forth? QSOs tend to be a little tricky, as I understand. And you've got to make sure the rig's all set up and all that good stuff. But can you work the world on 60?
No reason why not.
What's the record QSO distance?
I don't think we have a harmony yet, because I think Channel 5 might overlap with the British a little bit, but I don't know about WARC 15 yet.
Yeah.
That's the big challenge is once stuff gets lined up a little bit better, or people come up with some working this kind of weird splits. But I actually don't know.
There is on the WARC 15, there is like a narrow band, a channel for a spot frequency for right at the top, I think it is, of the band, for narrow digital modes. Or I'm wondering, is anyone running Whisper through 60 meters or something, and seeing it, even if there's no one at the other that can respond, they can pick you up.
I didn't run Whisper, but I can tell you there is a lot of FT8 activity on Channel 3, which I'm not sure how that works, because I think we're supposed to be centered a little bit. But there is FT8 activity on it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Well, my FT 450 is channelized for the UK, and without modifying it, it's only channelized now. Probably I'm going to have to, because Yacy said there was no firmware upgrade for this, I'm probably going to have to open it up all the way if I want to use it on the WARC 15. And looking at my Kenwood TS590, that only seems to do 60 meters in the States. And all it is in the 590 is you remove a diode or snip a diode, and that will give you the US bands and 60 meters. But I'm not sure if that's channelized or whether it gives you a block. I must admit I haven't been in the 590 yet. But as Leslie, as Matt, as the thing is until everybody gets harmonized, it is a little bit difficult. There are some of the spot frequencies in the UK that marry up with, or at least one or two that marry up with the States and other countries. So you kind of got to look at multiple band plans to see who you might be able to work, if that answers your question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, not really, but it's, I know it's a slightly nuanced and difficult and limited, from an HFDX perspective, but it'd be interesting to know how far can this stuff go.
Yeah.
So if anyone's done any sort of experiments on that, let us know.
Yeah, great band, but has its technical limitations in that we've not all got the same frequencies, I think is the answer to that one. And it'd be nice to see, as you say, how far it goes. Last news story. I like this one. This proves that amateurs are alive.
Is this the undead story?
Yeah. Yeah, you sounds like sounds like you've been to a punk rock concert, doesn't it? When you start talking about the undead concert. Okay, amateur radio operator finds signals from a dead NASA satellite. So I think this proves that amateurs are out there doing things, and I really like this. Do you want to do the undead then?
No, I'll leave it to Matthew on this one.
Oi, oi, oi! Right? Yeah, it's punk rock. Love it. The article that we're reading in the show notes, it's got a fantastic sort of sentence. You know, something he apparently does on a semi-regular basis, going out to listen to the airwaves from mysterious and undocumented satellites. Specifically, he was in search of the Zuma satellite, a secret U.S. government payload that was reportedly lost on its way into space. This is like cloak and dagger stuff, and you can imagine the guy's going out, listening by himself. Maybe he heard the wow signal as he was doing it as well. I don't know, because he's an amateur radio astronomer. Maybe he's got all sorts of stuff going on. Yeah, and he's come across something that the big boys, NASA, gave up on. They seem to have written off this image satellite from 2005. And lo and behold, he's picked up something to indicate that it's there. Fantastic. You know, this reminds me of amateur astronomers that used, telescopes back in the day, and they discovered planets, right? They kind of had an idea something was out there and they found it, and or comets or whatever it might be. And so this guy's doing it a little closer to home, but nonetheless pretty hard to do, to go out and listen to some space junk and find that it's in the right orbit. It is, and to trace it back to where it came from. And this is part of something that NASA put up there years ago. So it just shows that we have technology, we can use radio, and we're smart, and we're doing it because it's fun, right? He's not getting paid to do this. He's an amateur.
Yeah, and it wouldn't say, hey, I'm satellite XYZ, would it? So you'd have to do your homework to find out what it was you found.
Exactly.
Bill, do you want to go on this one?
Anyway, Scott has a blog. He's on Twitter. I actually was following him on Twitter. I didn't realize that. A lot of stuff on Twitter, so I got lost in the noise. But I did read his blog about this. Very fascinating stuff. 2275.905 megahertz. Now that is a groovy receiver right there. And he's using Sat Tools RF, and he figured it out and reported it upstream, and apparently I guess NASA's confirmed it, and I guess they're seeing if they can recontact this thing. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I suppose if they lost it, or they believed to have lost it in 2005, that's 13 years ago. I would guess that anybody working on that project probably isn't on that project, and I would guess a large proportion of the people don't even work for NASA anymore. So, recovering that satellite is probably going to give NASA a bit of a headache, I would guess. What do you think?
Yeah, getting the old guys back, who works on this project, mate, where's the phone book? I can just visualize it now.
Yeah.
It's like the old Y2K problem with computers back in the day, right? When they had to dust off all those programmers who used COBOL and Fortran 77.
Yeah.
It's a good story. This is what radio amateurs do,
Hey, don't make fun of Fortran 77, man. That's good stuff.
I'm not laughing. I'm sure it still makes my local bank work. I mean, I don't think they've the conditions of core banking systems in 40 years. There you go.
I think most of them have COBOL anyway. But yeah, Dr. James L. Birch was the image principal investigator. So he and they got a hold of Richard Berkeley, the ground systems manager. So they definitely dug everybody up and got them looking at this again.
Yeah, man and boy. Yeah. But no, that's a good one. So let's give a shout out to the amateur. Scott Tilley, and his call sign is VE7 Tango India Lima or Victor Alpha 7 LF for low frequency. So I should do that. Lima or Foxtrot, shouldn't I? Should do it properly because somebody will complain. So a brilliant piece of work there, Scott. And an interesting story for us to finish on. Okay, boys. Now let's have a quick whip round the table, see what you've all been up to. So I think we ought to let Leslie go first because he hasn't been around for a while. So what have you been up to, Leslie?
Well, but apart from trying to get better, one thing I came across was a radio which I know you're very familiar with, Martin. It's a handheld called an F25, and there was one of these going cheap with all the bits and pieces all in the box. And I thought, you know what, I fancy a punt on this little radio. It's a UHF handheld transceiver, initially made for PMR use. But I thought, well, let's just try this out for amateur radio use, and came pre-programmed, and actually it worked a dream, absolute dream. So I'm really chuffed with it. I messed about with the software and the leads it sent with it, but that's what I've been playing with, and really, really chuffed with it. So that's what I've been playing with.
Yeah, well, I actually used to repair those. It's actually an ICOM ICF25 UHF transceiver, and that was actually a better radio than the ICOM rig that followed it later on, in my opinion, because the one that followed it on, the 4002, effectively suffered from people smashing the volume control and the channel knobs off. Every time they dropped them, it did it, and it never fitted the hand nicely. The ICF25 fits in the hand nicely. It's comfortable. It's ergonomically nice. And as I said to you, most of the faults on the ICOM radio are down to abuse, and they get dropped or whatever. And I've repaired a large number of them, so I know most of the stock faults on them, mate. So if you have had any problems. Well,
I'm very pleased with it. Like, it's just for pottering about on the local repeater, but yeah, learning a bit and about the bits and pieces. I mean, I know you've got a lot of experience working on these things, but I mean, it's like a lot of radios. It's the nut that's attached to the main dial that causes a problem.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. Usually when they're on a building site and they throw them in the concrete mixer. The radio don't work very well. I tell you what, PMR, I'm diversifying off here, PMR, the number of times we'd have a complaint on a Monday morning that the radios didn't work on a Friday afternoon. You check back and the weather, it was pouring with rain in London. So they swore blind that the radios weren't working properly so that the crane operator couldn't send stuff down. They could all sit in the tea room all afternoon and get paid. I never found any wrong with half the radio calls we got on a Monday morning. But
well, I never got a signal that managed to get a radio signal that got past on an on-off switch.
That's true. Okay, Bill, what have you been up to?
Well, trying to chase Z Charlie 4 Alpha on RTTY. They're apparently on the UK base at Cyprus for a couple days, trying to pick them up because I need them on RTTY, and trying to get an AO92, which is not going well. Last weekend I did make 2 QSOs on Winter Field Day. A lot of stuff was going on last weekend, so I didn't get on as much as I wanted to, but I turned on some PSK31, saw 2 stations, worked them quick.
All right.
Also doing the FT8, still chasing grids. I don't know why. This weekend coming up, when this show comes out, it'll be in the middle of the Mexico RTTY contest. That's always a fun one. And the weekend after, February 11th and 12th, is CQ Worldwide WPX RTTY, which, hey, I actually count as sort of rare DX on that one, so that one's always a fun one.
Yeah, sounds interesting. This ZC4 Alpha, is that Akatiri base on Cyprus between Pathos and Limassol? Or is that the one further over? I'll put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. It's listed as the UK sovereign base area, commencing the 25th of January for 6 days, focusing on CW, a little SSB, and a little RIDI. And it's what's that OQRS stuff? Oh, that's where your request QSL card, isn't it? From Mike 0 Uniform Romeo X-Ray.
Right.
So they're having a little time they're down there working. So
Okay.
I believe it's Bob and Steve. Oh no, that was last year. I'm not sure who's working there. 6 operators and 3 stations.
Yeah.
I would talk more about it, but there's just the A to B little blurb on QRZ.
Right. No, the only thing I've been through that military base, and when you're if you ever go to Cyprus on holiday, you can operate as 5B/ in the UK call sign if you're a UK operator, and full license anyway, but you're not allowed to operate in the ZC4 on the military bases. There's 2 of them. And they're actually quite massive. They're like a town almost. And if you drive from Paphos through to Limassol, it's a lot nicer to go on the coast road rather than belt down the motorway. And you actually drive through that place, and it's quite interesting. Don't see much military stuff, but it's quite pretty. So, that was the only reason I asked, Bill. So.
Yeah, I made the mistake of looking it up quick while you were talking, and so I forgot Cyprus is the country that's split between 2 areas. Yeah. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there.
Yeah, the Turks invaded in, I think it's the 70s. Don't hold me as gospel, and I'm sure lots of people are going to email me and say it was the 80s or whatever. But there was a Turkish invasion. And effectively the top of the country is occupied by Turkey. The bottom half is occupied by Greek Cypriots. And I believe there are 2 UK bases. There's one between Paphos and Limassol. And if memory serves me right, there's another one over at Iron Napa end of the island, somewhere over there. I can't remember exactly where it's looking at the maps.
That's exactly what it looks like on the map.
Yeah, I'm doing it from memory, Bill.
I'm impressed.
So, I tend to go over every few years, so kind of that. And if you go up on Mount Olympus, the golf balls don't exist, and that's all I'm going to say. So they'll get me into trouble. Matthew, what have you been up to?
What have I been up to? A little bit of DIY in radio. I have this great book published in 1977. It's a kind of a classic, solid state design for the radio amateur. Doug DeMaw, Whiskey 1 Fox Bravo, and
that's a classic.
Whiskey 7 ZOI. And it's a heavy, dense book. It's non-trivial reading. But if you dip into it the right place, you get a useful circuit and useful ideas. And I don't have a keyer. I have a KX3. Sure, I have a keyer. But in terms of playing with circuits and things, I'm learning more. So the straight key, I had built a little code practice oscillator over Christmas to take down with me to Spain, and that was great. But hammering away with the straight key, I kind of want to use a paddle. And so I built a simple keyer out of that book circuit, and it's great. It works really well. I had a bit of fun making my own PCB boards with, etching and solder mask and all that kind of stuff. And as an extension of that, in October of last year, 2017, I was at the Essex CW boot camp up, in Essex. I can't remember exactly the town. I apologize. But up there was one of the guys at the club, a guy called Dave Ellis, G4AJY, who gave a nice presentation to the audience on a simple little circuit to create an analog meter that would show you the words per minute speed of your keyer. So basically, you hit your dit in the keyer, and the pulses push an analog meter up to some calibrated level. So I've been making that little circuit as well. So I'm pulling all these parts together to make a little box with a code practice oscillator, a keyer, a little bit of a meter to show me my words per minute speed, bits and pieces. Did a bit of Earth bouncing in the club the other night on Monday night as well. I know, Martin, you want to talk about that probably at length, so I'll let you add to that. I'm sorry?
I was going to say, actually, I was teaching, so I didn't get to do that. But I did wonder whether you caught a satellite.
Yeah. So, no, it wasn't well, yeah. So what happened? Well, we used a big old, 2-meter Yagi. I think it was like 12 elements or something. A huge gain, like 30 plus dB or something. And we used JT65, and we had sort of a printout of what good looks like. If you see this spike on your graph, you've done it. And we got that picture. We had that in the software. We had a spike. We took a screenshot, but we couldn't repeat it. And try as we might, realigning this large beast of a Yagi across the car park outside the scout hut that we use as a Monday night clubhouse, we didn't really repeat with any consistency that sort of spike out of the noise floor. So we got something. Was it a bird? Was it a plane? We think it was the moon, because if it was anything closer, like scattering off a plane or something, the reflection wouldn't have happened in the right way, because we used echo mode from JT65, which is like a 6-second period of transmit and listen. Anyway, long story short, it was very exciting. I thought we did really well as a club, and it's a first step that we'll have to do more of in the future. And I think we worked a little bit of HMS Belfast not so long ago, last week, I think. So overall, it's been a fairly hands-on week for me, which is unusual, which is great.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I'd have enjoyed being with you guys in the car park, albeit it was cold. But I've got a couple of students that are desperately trying to get their foundation license, so we were doing some work with them. Well, moving on from me, I went to HMS Belfast with you. I took a old PSK kit I made. They're no longer in production, but a Small Wonders Lab 20-meter PSK transceiver. And I took it up there. It transmits at 5 watts, and you have power, aerial socket, audio in, audio out. You don't even have an on-off switch. You put the power on and it's going. Plugged it into a little computer, and I was starting to get some contacts, and we did get a bit of a sniff from a gentleman from the States, but unfortunately, I was still fiddling with the configuration when he called me back. I didn't spot him, so my apologies if you tried to work GB2 RN a couple of weeks ago on PSK. I was still fiddling with the configuration when you called me back and didn't spot it straight away. Also, Fusion, been playing a fair bit with Fusion from the car. Had some interesting contacts, so that's working quite well. I will own up and admit now, for the whole of this recording, I wear headphones. I wear headphones just to try and stop Skype echoing back and causing problems. However, the boys know that I have an Amazon Echo here, and I was expecting them all to start shouting Alexa and do all sorts of bits and pieces. So not only have I got the headphones on, I've muted the microphone on the Alexa for the moment while we're recording this, because I didn't want it to keep kicking off. But in nicest possible way, and I'll talk more about it at the 73s at the end, but a gentleman called John Hawkes, K2TCW, sent me a very, very nice surprise in the post the other week, last week. I came in and the wife said, "You been buying things again?" I went, No, I haven't ordered anything. We got something from Amazon, and opened up, and John had sent me a Amazon Echo to try and find out why the ICQ podcast doesn't run through the Echo. And my initial results are we've probably picked a very, very bad name for a podcast. Unfortunately, when you talk to it, it goes off to Amazon. It then voice processes and comes back and shows you what in their app, what you actually said, and you can play your voice back. I am sure I've asked for the ICQ podcast, but when I see what it actually replied, it doesn't like letters, so it'll do the I. The C it does as SEE, and it spells the word Q. And then it says, I can't find anything typed that way. So, unfortunately, well, it says it can't find it, but it's obviously looking for a textual string to go and search a database. So, I'm working on it. I have managed... Have you tried being explicit, saying, look for letter I, letter C, letter Q podcast? Not saying letter. I have a slight botch in that I found a skill. You effectively can load skills or write your own skill, and computer programs out of my skill set, in truthfulness, and excusing the pun because I'm not good at it. But I did find a skill that said that you could set up playlists. And because I've only got one item in the playlist, which is the RSS feed for the ICQ podcast, when I ask it to open that skill, it instantly goes off and plays the ICQ podcast. But that is a bit of a fiddle at the moment. But I'm trying to work out how to do it, and as soon as I work out how to do it, we'll inform all the listeners. And Martin Ruffell's working on it as well, as is Chris. And we're trying to get this to work, but we're having different results between the three of us. They're not always consistent, so not 100% sure at the moment. So that's what I've been up to. Probably spent too much time on this, John, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And once again, thanks very much. Okay, well, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. Leslie, good to have you back with us. Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB.
It's been a blast, Martin. It's always fun. That's why we do this,
Yeah. And you've been so long, I almost gave you an M call sign.
I know.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry, I gave Bill a UK call sign the other episode. Didn't I, Bill? Mr. Bill Barnes N3JIX.
Yeah, I appreciate the vote of confidence there. And I'm glad to hear Leslie back.
Yeah.
Glad you're back, mate.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Well, we got Leslie back because we managed to get the recording schedule. That's why you've done two in a row, so we can get Leslie back on the schedule. And Leslie's not working nights because the original schedule was that every time we were going to get Leslie to record, he was on nights. So we wanted you, Leslie, so we altered it.
Cheers, thanks.
Yeah. And we also thank you to Matthew, Mr. Matthew Nassau M0NJX. Thanks, Matt.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure. And it's great to hear the guys talk and get a chance to, turn around a few ideas about what's going on in our great hobby.
Yeah. Okay, then. Well, all that's left for me to do is say thanks very much, and 73's all.
Cheerio.
7-3s.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert-free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time for a look at the news in brief from me, Colin M6BOY. We start with news that InnovAntennas has released a new range of dual-band Yagis covering both 4 and 2 meter bands. The first in the range is a 12 element, which is 5 active elements on 17 MHz and 7 active elements on 144 MHz with a single feed point and a 2.4 boom. We've got links, obviously, to these on the ICQ podcast website, so check them out if you're interested in what the guys are doing. We've heard news of a 25-gram Pico balloon using the call sign of Lima Uniform 1 Echo Sierra Yankee, transmitting 25 milliwatts whisper on 14097.6 kHz upper sideband, has completed its first circumnavigation of the Earth. The Pico balloon was launched on the 19th of January in 2018 and celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Argentinian amateur radio satellite Lusat Oscar 19. So they keep an eye out for that one as it travels around the world. And in Australia, news here that the National Society, the Wireless Institute of Australia, are making representation for their regulator ACMA to increase the power levels for all class of licensees in Australia. They're looking for 50 watts for the foundation band, 200 watts for the standard, which is the equivalent of the UK intermediate license, and 1500 watts for the advanced level. So it'd be interesting to see how the Australian group get on there with their local regulator. Well, now we head over to our features episode with a feature on RF safety. Hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
On today's feature, I'd like to talk about RF safety a little bit, specifically evaluating compliance with the FCC guidelines for human exposures to radio frequency electromagnetic fields. This is the infamous Office of Engineering Technology Bulletin 65 Supplement B, additional information for amateur radio stations. This is a presentation I ran across the other night that I gave the various clubs back in the 90s when this first came out. So we'll just dive right in and talk a little bit about RF safety. So the history on this, at least in America, is that the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969 required the federal government to evaluate their actions for the quality of the human environment. In 1985, the FCC first adopted guidelines for evaluating human exposure to RF energy, originally using the ANSI, American National Standards Institute 1982 RF Protection Guidelines. The Office of Engineering and Technology in the FCC updated the rules with better ANSI guidelines in 1996 for effective date of October 15, 1997 via FCC Office of Engineering Technology Bulletin 65, and then shortly later in November, OET Bulletin 65B, additional information for amateur radio stations. This was a really big deal because it came out and it was kind of quick and everybody was confused and there was a lot of discussion, and back then we were posting on rec.ham radio asking questions to each other, but we figured it out, and I just want to talk about it because the guidelines still apply today and they still are meaning today. So the bottom line, what does this mean to you as an amateur radio operator? You need to be aware of RF exposure, and you need to take steps to minimize the effects on people. So one of the slides I have up here that I'm talking to is, why do you even want to comply? Well, RF energy has been proven to heat human tissue. However, it does not have sufficient energy to cause genetic damage. But heating human tissue is still bad. And I always say, hey, you don't want to be cooked, because a microwave oven is basically a radio transmitter, just focused inward. So how do you comply with these exposure guidelines? There's 3 acceptable methods to determine your station complies with the FCC RF exposure regulations. Number 1, you can do calculation-based from the FCC OET Bulletin 65. You can do calculations based on computer modeling, or you can actually measure the field strength using calibrated equipment. I use the RF safety exposure worksheet. If you're above an exposure limit, you can do a series of things to fix it. This goes into a lot more detail on page 43 of the OET Bulletin 65B. But basically, restricting access to high RF fields area, fencing. This is what we did at work. We put fences around rooftop radio transmitters so that you had to have yet another set of keys with signs saying that this is a high RF field. For you guys, you can also operate at reduced power when people are present in high RF fields. QRP for the win is what I always say here. Transmitting at times when people are not present in high RF field areas. Consider a duty factor of your transmissions. SSB has a lower duty factor than Morris, which has a lower duty factor than RTTY. So when I have to do my calculations, I have to assume 100% duty factor because I'm using RTTY as my mode most of the time. You can time average exposure. So for instance, in a 20-hour contest, I'm only transmitting 20 to 30% of the time. You can time average that way. The easiest thing to do is the next one, relocating the antenna or raising the antenna height. How horrible it must be that, my tower has to go up another 10 feet to get this antenna out of exposure zones. I can incorporate shielding techniques. I've never actually seen any good examples of this. So if you have pictures of what people put in for shielding for radio transmitters for this, drop us this comment on the ICQ podcast so that I want to see pictures, because that sounds really neat. You can use monitoring or protected devices, or you can or you can erect warning signs or notification signs. Like I said, this is what we did at work. We put fences up, we erected signs. We have a cut the transmitter off while you're working in certain zones. But for real world amateur radio operators, the simplest thing I found is just move the antenna to a safer location or reduce your power. So before I go into the details of actually going into an evaluation, is my RF signal causing harm, I just want to talk about two definitions, and that is controlled versus uncontrolled exposure. And I'll just read this out here. Occupational or controlled exposure limits apply to situations in which persons are exposed as a consequence of their employment, and in which those persons who are exposed have been made fully aware of the potential for exposure to RF energy and can exercise control over their own exposure. So for our purposes, that means it's us and our family members in our immediate household, but not the neighbors. And I always say here, talk to your kids about transmitting antennas and stay away when you're using them. On the whole grocery list of things you got to talk to your kids about. Make sure you talk to them about RF safety. The other one is uncontrolled exposure. This is the general population. Uncontrolled exposure limits apply to situations in which the general public may be exposed, in which persons are exposed as a consequence of their employment but are not fully aware of their potential exposure and cannot exercise control over their exposure. This is the group that the general public always falls into. And neighbors of amateur radio station are, even if you explain it to them, they're still considered, for compliance reasons, general public. I briefly touched on duty cycle earlier, and this is where we talk about your transmit mode matters. And I'll just briefly go over this just quickly. Duty factor. So they talk about RF energy. Morse CW is a 40% average duty factor. So that means if you're shipping 10 watts in, they're assuming that only 4 watts is actually causing RF exposure. Same thing with SSB, it's 20%, 10 watts in, 2 watts roughly exposure when you do the calculations. FM, RIDI, almost every digital mode, AM 100%, so 10 watts in equals 10 watts of RF exposure. So we are allowed to have an exemption from routine evaluations, and this is where I get, chant go EQRP. You have to be in compliance. However, if you're using less than 500 watts on 160, 80, and 40, you don't have to keep station records that you've done an evaluation. 425 watts on 30 meters, which doesn't matter because you're not allowed to go over 100 watts anyway, so you're good on 30 meters. 225 watts on 20 meters, 125 on 17 meters, 100 watts on 15 meters, and then we get into the ranges where I actually keep records. 12 meters. If you use more than 75 watts, you should do an RF. You have to have an RF evaluation, in case anyone ever asks you about it. 50 watts on 10 meters and 50 watts on VHF, 70 watts on UHF. There's a nice little chart and it goes up from there. So let's talk about an example here. So my place, I'm going to pick 10 meters, so I actually have to do the evaluation. The antenna is 30 feet in the air, so that's roughly 9 meters up. Worst case scenario, I use the 706, 100 watts of power on RIDI. Based on the formula, as long as the person is, 2 meters away in a controlled environment or almost 4 meters away in an uncontrolled environment, we're in compliance. The antenna's 30 foot in the air, we're in good shape. But let's just say you're doing something with NVIS on 10 meters, which would not work well. You just got to make sure that when you're standing at the ground and you reach up for the antenna, that you're still at least 2 meters away. So this is where things get a little confusing, and that's why I recommend running your own evaluation and just making sure that however you have your antenna installed, it's away from where people can get to it. I ran one just for the discussion's sake on QRP. It's like, how close can you get to a 10 watt antenna, or it's bad? Half a meter controlled, 1.3 meters uncontrolled. So, keep that antenna away from people, including yourself. Another example I use, my friend has a tri-band antenna. It is 12 meters high, and he is using 100 watts of power. Well, unless you're standing in the direct beam of that tri-band, and you're within, a couple yards, couple meters, the antenna is so high that it's okay. It's a good antenna install. So, more information. So, I've been using for quite a few years a website by Paul Evans, Victor Papa 9 Kilo Foxtrot. He actually has an amateur RF safety calculator out there. You just punch the values in, run the computation, and it tells you based on controlled, uncontrolled, whether you're in compliance or not. Go read the FCC OAT Bulletin 65B. Another one is ARRL has a nice page with a whole bunch of information on here as well if you want to read more. But the bottom line, your radio transmitter is creating energy. The energy could harm tissue by warming it. Just make sure that you have your station set up in such a way that people in your family and people in the public can't get close enough to cause harm. If you have any questions on this one, drop a note in the comments block, and Colin and Martin will get me the questions and we can go from there, and if we need to do another follow-up, we can. This is my brief talk today about RF safety and the exposure limits imposed by the FCC. Thank you and have a great day, and as always, have fun with amateur radio.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, guys, as we come to the end of episode 259 of the ICQ podcast, I hope you all enjoyed it if you've got this far through. A few things to catch up on and announcements to be made. Colin had an email in, and he doesn't say who from, but he put it in my section to have a look at. And it said, could we cover how a US ham could get a UK license? Well, we certainly could. And he said, easy to do it the other way. I suspect hard because the practicals are going to work against us. Yeah. If you need a UK license, you have to do them in order, exactly the same as you do in the States. So like you do technician, general and advanced or full, over here you do foundation, intermediate and full. Now the foundation license does have some practicals, and they have to be signed off by a registered instructor before you can take the written test. And the same with the intermediate exam. There are practicals that need to be signed off before they will allow you to take the intermediate exam. Full license in the UK requires no practicals because you've already done them at foundation and intermediate. However, I don't know if you need a UK address. I really don't. Not even thought about it. So maybe we'll look into that one and get back to whoever posted that one with Colin in the near future. I'd like to thank Mr. John Hawkes, K2TCW. I mentioned John sent me a Amazon Echo, and he said, this is what he wrote. Hi Martin, I heard your previous podcast and thought I'd send you an Echo. Took a little longer than expected as they hadn't been released in the UK. So we're a little bit behind the States on that, but it arrived. John then carried on to mention that he's working on an APRS project with a Raspberry Pi and a Raspberry Pi Hat, which is one of these little boards that sits on top of the Raspberry Pi. And he's trying to get it to work over a longer distance. At the moment, it's only got a few milliwatts out. But the links he sent me look very, very interesting, John. Looks like you're doing a lot of work on this, and it's what amateur radio is about, us all fiddling and understanding and experimenting. So nice to see what you're up to. Don't forget to drop me pictures when you get it working. I'd be interested to see it working, John. And once again, thank you very, very much for the Echo. I'm working on it and trying to get the best way that I can tell our listeners how to listen to the ICQ podcast. As I say, I have a very simple way of getting it to work, but it's a bit, it's a dirty way. If I don't think it's supposed to work that way, but it works very, very well the way I've got it set up. Okay, don't forget the website. The website's there for you, and we're also on Facebook and Twitter, and Colin and I are also on LinkedIn. So there's many ways you can contact us. Obviously, you can go to the website, fill in the form, send us an email, and come through. The website is www.icqpodcast.com, and if you want to email us, it's info@icqpodcast.com. I'd like to thank the following presenters: Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB, Mr. Matthew Nassau M0NJX, and Mr. Bill Barnes N3JIX for joining me on the News Roundtable this time. I enjoyed that very much, and so you had some great comments, so thanks guys. And Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MMG unfortunately couldn't make it, but he'll be back for the next one which this group records. If you'd like to get involved, once again, you can contact us via email at info@icqpodcast. And if you're over at the website, don't forget to sign up for Colin's newsletter. He does send out information when the podcast is released and things that don't quite make it into our podcast, but are still very, very interesting. So worth a look. We do publish the ICQ podcast to many, many places, including YouTube. So if you wanted to show somebody the ICQ podcast, although it's an audio based, we are on YouTube, and there are a few videos which we've done in the past, and more will arrive as we get round to doing them. But the audio is also available on YouTube. So don't forget, there's lots of ways you can get hold of us. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for your downloads. We really, really do appreciate those, and thank you very, very much for making the time of downloading and listening. Thank you very much, guys. I'd like to thank Mr. Bill Barnes again, N3JIX, for his feature on RF safety. Quite a difficult one to do, because it's not, run-of-the-mill top flight which everybody wants to think of, but safety is very important, and we need to keep each and every operator safe. I know that it's predominantly to do with the States and the licensing in the States, but it's still very relevant in any part of the world. Often us amateurs don't think about RF safety, and it's something we should really, really think about. So thanks, Bill, for doing that one for us. Right, well, there's only one thing left for me to do, and go and make that lovely Mrs. B a cup of tea, find her a biscuit for when she gets in from work, and don't forget, guys, we'll do it all again in a fortnight's time. 73.